Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Great Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Well, here it is another Wednesday, and today we have for you part three of our many-part series, Why I Reject the Bible. Today's topic is women and the Bible. So let's get started. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Jason Long of Biblical Nonsense, because he was responsible. He takes credit for a lot of the biblical quotes that I came up with today. So if you want to visit his website, go to www.biblicalnonsense.com, and there you'll find many other very compelling reasons why you should reject the Bible like I do. Okay. The story today begins with the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. God blames Eve more than he blames Adam for tempting her husband. He greatly increases her pains in childbirth, and says her desire shall be to her husband, and he shall rule over her. This is the Bible's explanation of women's childbirth pains today. In this scenario, women are punished forever for Eve's actions. It is also the Bible's explanation of why men are able to lord it over their women. Exodus 21 verses 7 through 11. A daughter that is sold to a man does not have the right to leave, as a male servant does. If she displeases her master, she can be bought back again by her father. He can't sell her to foreigners. If he buys her for his son, she must be given the rights of a daughter, although a daughter's rights in those days couldn't have been very great. The only way she can go free for nothing is if he denies her food or clothing. From this we know that women were traded for money and treated like slaves. In Deuteronomy 22 verses 13 through 21, it describes how if a man no longer wants to remain married to his wife, he can accuse her of not being a virgin when he married her and attempt to have her killed. In this case, her parents must produce a blood stain, or she will be stoned to death. If the parents do produce a blood stain, he will be fined a couple of pounds of silver and forced to stay married to her unto death. No divorce was to be provided for the woman. A woman is also left out of her husband's will. If her husband dies, his inheritance goes entirely to his sons. If he has no sons, it goes entirely to his daughters. If he has no daughters, it goes entirely to the closest male relative, according to Numbers 27 verses 8 through 11. A wife is forced to marry her husband's brother if she has no sons, according to Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 through 9. The brother has the right to refuse the marriage, but the woman does not. According to Leviticus 15 verses 19 through 30, a woman is unclean during her menstrual period. Anything and anyone she touches is unclean. If you touched something she touched, you become unclean until you bathe. You have to kill 2 doves to undo this uncleanliness. Childbirth is also considered unclean, according to Leviticus 12 verses 1 through 5. If she gives birth to a girl, she is unclean twice as long as she would be if she gave birth to a boy. This implies that girls are dirtier than boys. According to Deuteronomy 22, verses 28 through 29, a man who has sex with a woman who's not betrothed will give the girl's father 50 shekels of silver and is forced to marry her. So the Bible forces women to marry their rapist. If she is betrothed and she doesn't cry out, then the man and woman will both be stoned to death, since she is considered an adulteress, not a rape victim. The man is stoned to death because he violated another man's wife, according to Deuteronomy 22, verse 24. It's obvious that the husband is considered the victim, not the woman. Even forcing a woman to marry a man is rape if the woman is unwilling, but it gets even worse. According to Numbers 31, verses 17 through 18, God orders them to kill every woman that laid with a man, including wives of the enemy. But all the women children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. This is God giving permission to rape underage girls. The Bible gives a long list of sexual relations considered immoral in Leviticus 20, verse 10 through 21. But notably absent are a father-daughter incestuous relationship. In fact, Lot and his daughters commit incest, and God does nothing to them. God made a father the master of his daughters, so the God of the Bible obviously does not disapprove of him raping them. Also, the God of the Bible highly favors and shines down on people with multiple wives, such as David and Solomon. So the Bible obviously doesn't disapprove of having multiple wives. The Bible warns that having multiple wives can turn you away from God, but other than that admonition, they do not disapprove. In 2 Samuel 12, verses 11 through 12, 16, verse 22, and 20, verse 3, God allows David's son to rape his wives, so God imprisons the women for life. In Judges 11, verses 29 through 39, God divinely inspires Jephthah to vow to sacrifice his daughter, who comes out of the entrance to his house first when he returns from battle. He sacrifices her, and God doesn't stop him. According to Proverbs 31, verse 10, a virtuous woman is a rarity and is worth far more than rubies. But then all human beings should be worth more than material possessions. In Jeremiah 8, verse 10, people's wives are given away. In Jeremiah 13, verse 22, it justifies a woman being raped. Ezekiel 18, verse 6 denounces menstruation. In Hosea 3, verses 1 through 2, God tells Hosea to acquire a wife he knew would be purchased. Hosea 9, verses 11 through 12 and 13, verse 16 describes aborting children in their mother's wombs. In Nahum 3, verse 13, an army is ridiculed by comparing them to women. In Zechariah 11, verse 4, they take part in a war that ends with women being raped. In the New Testament, it's not much better. Ephesians 5, verse 22 to 24 orders women to submit to their husbands in everything, even something evil. Colossians 3, verse 18, Titus 2, verse 5, and 1 Peter 3, verse 1 all say women should submit to their husbands. 1 Peter 3, verses 2 through 6 forbids women from wearing any decorative jewelry. And 1 Peter 3, verse 7 refers to women as the weaker vessel in a couple. 2 Peter 2, verse 8 deems Lot to be a righteous man, even though he offered his betrothed daughters up to be raped by a mob of homosexuals surrounding his house. 1 Timothy clearly blames women for the downfall of man. 1 Timothy 2, verse 9 through 15. 1 Timothy also weighs in on widows, judging young widows as full of gossip, according to 1 Timothy 5, verses 5 through 15, and says we shouldn't help widows because they will receive their help in answer to prayer. In 1 Corinthians 7, verses 1 through 2, Paul says it's good for a man to refrain from touching a woman, yet realizes the need for men to have sexual contact and permits each to have a wife. In Romans 1, verse 27, Paul describes men leaving the natural use of a woman to have sexual relations with other men, implying that the natural use of a woman is as a sexual outlet for men. In 1 Corinthians, Paul declares man to be the head of the woman, the way that Jesus is the authority figure for men. He says that women are the glory of men who were made for men, while men are the glory of God, according to 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3 through 9. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 5 through 7, he says a man shouldn't cover his head, whereas a woman should have her head covered at all times, or else should shave her head, which he also considers shameful. He does not permit them to speak in church, which he also considers a shame. If they have questions about the Bible, they should ask their husbands at home. What does Jesus have to say about women? Jesus believes he is doing women a favor by not allowing men to divorce their wives. Matthew 19, verses 8 through 12, he says, if it was for the hardness of men's hearts that Moses permitted them to divorce, but it was not so from the beginning. His disciples remark that it is probably better not to marry, after which Jesus describes becoming a eunuch for the sake of God. And we all know what a eunuch is. That's chopping off balls. We don't need to go into greater detail than that. So this is the Bible. This is what the Bible says about women. The Bible's derogatory toward women. It's defamatory. It's humiliating. It's degrading. It puts down women in every way possible. It deems women unclean in childbirth, in menstruation. All the natural functions of a woman are deemed unclean. And it's just a bad book. It's a bad book for women. It's a bad book for men. It's a bad book for children. It's a bad book for animals. That'll be a subject of a future video. Bad book for animals. But there's many reasons for a woman to reject the Bible, and that's what I do. I reject the Bible. I'm Sarah Jane Alphawolf, signing off. Tune in for part 4 of our series next week.